Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Church Militant special production, Vilified, CM in the News. From that first New York Times hit piece all those years ago, all the way to last week's FBI dossier, we're going to cover it all for you right now. I'm Michael Voris, along with Brad Eli. Brad.
Mike, that was quite the adventure. Leading us off early in the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump wasn't doing so well. The tide began turning, however, with the so-called October surprise, when WikiLeaks dumped thousands of Hillary Clinton's campaign emails from the hacked email account of her campaign director, John Podesta, a fake Catholic. Among thousands of emails leaked to the public were several addressing Catholics. The fall of 2016, Church Militant was all over this developing story. It involved a 2012 email exchange between Sandy Newman of the Soros-funded Voices for Progress and Podesta, discussing how to fool Catholics into embracing artificial contraception. It's Newman who writes, "This whole controversy with the bishops opposing contraceptive coverage, even though 98% of Catholic women and their conjugal partners have used contraception, has me thinking there needs to be a Catholic spring in which Catholics themselves demand the end of a middle-aged dictatorship and the beginning of a little democracy and respect for gender equality in the Catholic Church." End quote. Well, Podesta answers her, "We created Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good to organize for a moment like this, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee." Well, Church Militant's reporting on how Dems were playing Catholics helped swing the Catholic vote very early in the morning on November 9th.
Fox has called Trump. C-SPAN has called Trump.
What?
Yeah.
Put up the graphic.
At home, all of you sitting at home, join in on your space. There we go. All right. Thank you, heaven. Thank you, heaven. Now for the real celebration.
Well, encore, Mike. Let's see it. Let's do it again.
All right, so I gotta
right
say
here.
my dancing skills are better than that, but the desk, as you can tell from Brad, who was very nervous
for you.
that the desk was going to break underneath. That was happening because the night before, I'd made the promise that if Trump won, I'd get up and do a victory lap or victory dance on the desk, and didn't realize until I got on it just how shaky it was.
Had your red socks on, ready to go. Well, you know, the left has never forgotten us for it.
No, they have
all the
not.
way from New York Times, which we're going to get into, and rolling on forward, and all the way up to this recent FBI dossier. They just keep hitting us, and it's because of that very thing, helping to swing the Catholic vote. I don't know how much we helped swing the Catholic vote, but you know what? To whatever degree we did, they hate us for it.
Well, if you remember, first of all, it was interesting. If you saw at the beginning of that, we said, look, C-SPAN's called it, Fox, whoever it was, MSNBC, whoever we were naming out there. We had actually called it about an hour before that, and we were just waiting for all the networks. It was Pennsylvania, for those of you who remember that. Pennsylvania was the kind of, hey, what's going on here? There were not enough votes for Hillary to overcome Trump's lead. If she'd have gotten all the remaining, I think it was 60,000 votes, it still wouldn't have been enough to overcome his lead. He won by 40,000. The reason we were so into that is because the 3 states that he managed to break through have higher than the U.S. average population of Catholics, which at the time in 24, I believe, was at 23%. And all 3 of those states have well over that. And, we had been reporting on all of this because very early in that campaign, we weren't really paying that much attention to politics as a political process in the vote, but Hillary was standing in front of a group of, I don't think it was a Planned Parenthood conference, but essentially it's all the same. And she had said, religious values and teachings will have to change. And we were like, whoa, what? Pump the brakes. And because she said that, we turned our guns specifically towards the political arena and then started covering it and all of that. And because of it, in that run-up, we specifically spoke to Catholics in those states, those battleground states, which Trump won. And Trump won about 52% of the Catholic vote in that election, 51 to 52.
And he was trailing behind on the Catholic vote.
Yes, he was.
Well into 2016, all the way up through the summer, really.
Yeah.
Really up until that October surprise when the WikiLeaks all came out.
Yeah, it was very, it was very, and of course, so we get targeted. It's the whole point of this show. People are looking at us and going, hey, the secular media is looking at us and going, what's going on here? Who are these guys?
Well, to accentuate that point right there, when we reported on the WikiLeaks, our little site back in the day crashed because we got so much traffic coming to it.
That's right. We were talking about the that John Podesta email leak. There were a few other email leaks. We didn't show all of our emails in that series that were released, but it was clear that the Democrats, the Marxists, as I like to call them, because that's what they are, were targeting Catholics, targeting Catholic voters, trying to destabilize that because, since Kennedy, moving forward, you go from Kennedy, in 1960 to Roe v. Wade in 73. All of a sudden, Roe v. Wade splits the Catholic vote, and you've got roughly 50-50. And every single time, whoever wins the popular vote for the White House also has won a majority of the Catholic vote every single time. Even though Al Gore lost because of the Florida hanging Chad thing, Al Gore, although he won the popular vote, lost the Electoral College vote, he won a greater percentage of the Catholic vote. That's the one instance where somebody didn't occupy the White House but did win the Electoral College vote, not the popular vote. But that was Trump.
And those Podesta emails really had traction out there. There was one interview. I don't remember. You'll remember when I tell you the quote, the yelling from the crowd. The guy was being interviewed. Podesta was being interviewed, and I was on Fox or CNN, wherever.
That's right.
And someone said, "Podesta, I read your emails."
Yeah, that was actually very difficult for them to overcome. You don't need an awful lot. This people don't understand. You don't need hundreds of millions of voters to swing their votes.
No.
In this kind of electoral environment, which has really, let's face it, has been the case. This entire millennium so far, it has been the case. This whole century, you go back to 2000, it's a margin here or there. Obama got elected because he said, let's just peel away enough of the vote in some of those Republican categories. A few thousand here in this state, couple thousand over there, 500 or 600 in this precinct. That's all you need. The margin is so close that, if you win, Trump's total margin, I believe, was 80,000. There were a majority of them, a majority of those voters that were Catholic voted for him. And that's all we were talking about the entire 6-7 months before that election. Catholics, you have a duty to not vote for Hillary Clinton.
Well, the unique thing about Church Militant, unlike the Catholic establishment media, we actually cared about who got in the White House because of the fact that, like you say, religious freedom was under fire from Hillary Clinton. We couldn't really tickle the fancy on Catholic voters on abortion. They did not care about abortion really couldn't. But they didn't want to be played. They didn't want to be falsified. They didn't want their, the Catholic Alliance and these other, there was two groups actually that were formed out there by Podesta's left. And they were actually there to just falsify the Catholic presence. And they didn't want that. And that reporting really took home. The secular world is Luciferian media. They don't really care. The Catholic establishment media is really under the blue dem, bishop establishment. And so we were the ones that actually did the reporting on that. And that was that one little Achilles heel that was able to bring the Catholic vote around to Trump.
And again, it's just the margin. It's just very, very, very tiny margin. A couple thousand here or 5,000 or 6,000 over there in any of those battleground states, the famous blue wall that Trump pushed over in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. He pushed it over, and that's what got him in the White House.
A little mortar here, a couple bricks there. That's about it.
It doesn't take an awful lot. It really doesn't.
Well, the fact that they actually focused on Church Militant after that kind of surprised me, that they were actually really saying, you know what, you guys may be small, but you cast a big shadow. You can make a lot of noise. And that was picked up all through. We're going to find out all through the night here. And we really wanted to set it up here because of the fact of this. We were called LGBT hate groups, racist, alt-right, whatever you want to call it. It really came down just to reporting on a few of those key stories. And that's what was taken in because it had an effect. Trump got in the White House. So I think that particular thing right there, you have to read the rest of this show in context of that.
Yeah.
To really understand, well, why does the left hate you and vilify you and everything? Well, it's just because of that particular issue.
Yeah, I mean, you have to really consider, and that's a good point for watching the rest of this. Understand that we weren't really on the secular media's radar.
No.
We had, when the 2016 election came along, we'd already been in existence 10 years. And really, why would they pay attention to us? We were talking about Catholicism, and that's fine. We didn't invite them to come do stories on us, and they didn't call. But it was that 2016 election and sort of the run-up to it. All of that, once we kind of stepped into, what they considered their sacred arena, all of a sudden, some of their cannons turned our way.
Well, there was that vortex you did on Constantine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trump and Constantine. And even the right media, the media that's really not establishment per se, who should have cared about getting Trump in the White House, really didn't want to get their feet dirty at all with the politics of it. I don't have time for this, and politics, they all denigrated that. But then after Trump gets in there, well, they're all, happy as can be to say, oh, well, religious freedom, he's standing up for that, and he got pro-life judges in, and now, all this. Well, didn't you see down the road that could happen? You get a Constantine who's not a perfect man.
Yeah, that's all we talked about the entire time in the run-up to it. Trump's not Catholic. Hillary wasn't either, but Trump's not Catholic.
Democratic past.
It became kind of as a moving down the road, what's your best option? And, within the Catholic world, there has always been this kind of, well, if they're not 1,000% Catholic, then I can't vote for them. And that, that's an argument that you can certainly respect. That's fine. On the other hand, there is, well, you have to be involved in politics, and you're never going to have, from a Catholic point of view, the perfect candidate. So you just cede the ground, to the Marxist side of the house. And
they're going to make life miserable for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it came down to it, our take on all of this was pretty straightforward. It was a Trump presidency gives faithful Catholics breathing room. Gives us breathing room where we're not immediately on the defensive, like we had to be in Baltimore, for example. You have to, everything you do is immediately under fire, and you're constantly playing defense. We thought, well, this is good because he'll defend religious freedom, he'll put pro-life judges on the Supreme Court. It gives us, and that was our entire impetus. This will create a better atmosphere. A Trump presidency will create a better atmosphere for faithful Catholics than a Hillary Clinton presidency.
That's all you can ask from government.
That's it. All right. As we, Brad, you're up.
Rolling back to December 2016, the New York Times was the first mainstream media to attack with an article ultimately acknowledging Church Militant's role in Catholic conservative politics discourse. As the Trump administration prepares to take office, the use of Church Militant theology has gone well beyond its religious meaning and has taken on a political resonance. To fully grasp what Church Militant means in this highly politicized atmosphere, it helps to examine the broader movement and the role of traditionalist Catholic website called, to no surprise, churchmilitant.com. For some Catholic scholars and anti-hate advocates, the emergence of Church Militant theology in a politicized and highly partisan way is disturbing. Well, okay. The fact that New York Times really, they kind of bobbled things a little bit here.
They did.
They go back to Church Militant being tied with Steve Bannon and, the 2014, he wants his school of political thought out there.
In Tresalti at the monastery.
Yes, and they kind of tied that Church Militant, which is the idea of the actively fighting out for your salvation, because you got to fight the world, the flesh, and the devil. Nothing to do with AR-15s, nothing to do with grenades. That fight there has to do with the spiritual battle, first and foremost inside of yourself.
Correct.
And trying to use grace, and you got the devil trying to get you to sin, the people trying to get you to sin, and your own fallen human nature just dragging you down.
Right.
So the idea that the Church Militant, that whole militant thing today is very political and militaristic. Well, there is that, St. Paul talks about take up the sword of the faith and the shield, and all this type of stuff. Fine. Right. But New York Times kind of conflated or put together this idea that what Steve Bannon and his Church Militant movement was actually us and our Church Militant movement. So it didn't, they kind of fuzzed it in.
When I had the conversation, I was interviewed for that in the old control room for about, I want to say it was about an hour or so that I was interviewed for it, and I had to keep explaining to the reporter, who turns out was the reporter's name attached to the article also, I had to keep explaining to him that difference, that the Church Militant is a theological concept to describe the life of faithful Catholics here on earth, fighting flesh, devil, world, interiorly, so you die and go to heaven. And he kept referencing back to Steve Bannon when Steve Bannon used the term Church Militant. And funny enough, Steve used it pretty much in that same sense, but he was saying, now let's apply it to, getting out here and in politics. And even then, Steve wasn't, advocating violence. He was just talking about, let's take the interior fight out into the world to the exterior also, and talk about politics and training and apologetics and getting involved in, helping change the culture, bring back Western civilization. And he just could not seem to get this through his head. And he misread Steve Bannon's Church Militant, couldn't quite understand the term. He told me he looked it up online and said, well, this still, I know it's got this interior life thing to it, but, there's the Crusades and the Inquisition. And I said, those are sort of separate things, everything to do with the Church Militant. He said, yeah, but there were militaries involved. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how many times do I have to? And so when the report came out, that Church Militant report came out, it was, here we are, we're churchmilitant.com is somehow tied into, on the edge of political overthrow and some sort of violence, and friends with Steve Bannon. I had not at that point spoken with Steve Bannon, and I'm not sure ever in any way, and communicated with him anyway at that point when he did the interview with me. And I was, he seemed incredulous about that. He said, he asked me 3 times. So you never emailed, you've never talked, nothing? Isn't that strange that he would use the name of your organization? I said, it's not the name of our organization he's talking about. He's talking about the Church Militant, not churchmilitant.com.
Right.
And he said, are you sure of that? I'm like, yes, I'm sure of that. He's never talked to us at that point.
The term existed for centuries upon centuries, not millennia,
It was very, I have to say though, but look, when it comes to, if you're going to have somebody screw up an article or a data point, that certainly worked to our favor.
Well, yeah, I just want to give a shout out to New York Times. Thank you for all the publicity. We appreciate it. Yeah, that's our marketing division right there, the New York Times. Did more than our own marketing division could ever do.
Yeah, that's tremendous. It was very good. Yes, we got on the SPLC hate group list because of that, Southern Poverty Law Center. They all picked it up and ran with it. It's like, yes, thank you guys.
Well, we would like to say too, another lens to keep in mind for the rest of the show here too, is that every time we enter into another one of these stories, it gets a lot more readers on our site, because all their readers and looking at us and saying, I used to be Catholic, or I have, leaning towards that, or whatever, or what I hear you guys saying really makes a lot of sense. Puts a lot more eyes on our site every single time you see an uptick. You can't help it. The fact that, oh yeah, the FBI memo came out, thanks, Don't you guys ever learn to,
There's something to be said for, you guys on the left sort of need to understand that you're publicity machines when you do this.
There's no bad publicity, really.
Yeah.
It gives you an opportunity to explain yourself, the forum, gets more eyes on your site. It's a win-win.
If they actually kicked in the door and kind of arrested us and dragged us, that'd be a great fun.
Hopefully we get footage of it.
Great fundraising tool.
I'm backing you guys 100%. They don't have time to.
I think a point that is worth noting here is that, and that first New York Times article, and all of these subsequent ones, the ignorance when it comes to religion in general, but specifically Catholicism, really is a moment to stop, pump the brakes, and realize just how not even uninformed, badly informed they are about things specifically Catholic. They don't get, and look, I don't understand, wouldn't expect that, I'm pretty sure the reporter that interviewed me was Jewish, but it doesn't matter if he's Jewish or Presbyterian or whatever. I'm not going to expect somebody who is not a Catholic raised in Catholicism to necessarily understand some finer details of Catholicism, then don't write your articles, or go learn something. Or when you're talking to people who are experts in it, like Church Militant, why don't you do a little background research first? It's important to understand that when any of these articles come out in the secular media or the leftist Catholic media, they don't know theology. They don't. We were founded and still are an apostolate. We talk about theology. We also talk about the theology as it's applied out in the world, in politics and education and whatever, general culture. But you need to understand, everybody listening, you need to understand that when you go through these things, these guys are badly informed about Catholicism, not just ignorant, but badly informed. That's even worse.
I think that's a big point right there, is called to mind. They're coming from a bias. They're coming from a filter that already has quite a bit of dialing in from the world out there. Talking about the Crusades, talking about Galileo. These guys are anti-science, they're medieval. All this, everything that could possibly be labeled has already been done, and that's the filter that they're coming from. So when you're trying to talk with them and they're trying to run it through that filter, and do the calculations on that, they're like, this is static. It's not making sense. It's not adding up, basically.
And that comes out in their articles. I mean, in my secular media days, they would never have published any of our stories, my stories or anything, where you just go say something about like the nation's water supply, for example. You're doing a story and you don't first go find out how all that works.
Right.
It's just kind of common sense.
Times have changed. Flip the calendar, and 2017 saw no less than 7 major articles targeting Church Militant, all right after the New York Times, with the first 3 calling CM a media empire. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Guess we cast a pretty big shadow on the left's parade. The first strike came in February from the Detroit Free Press, which tried to explain, quote, how a right-wing Ferndale fringe group is building a multimedia empire. Just a few days later, USA Today got into the act. Multimedia empire. Right. Okay, guys, you're making us blush. All right, thank you. Then in May, The Atlantic released its missile.
This ship is sinking, and everyone on this ship is going to die. But I have a lifeboat right here, and you don't have to go down with the ship. You can be saved. That's the good news.
Media empire. Okay, that's us. That's media empire here. Building an empire. I love it.
Does that make me the emperor?
Now, yeah. Emperor Voris over his media empire.
Emperor Vortex.
Now, there was one thing just before we get on here. I wanted to bring this up. Why does the left hype us as an empire? Why do they see us so huge? It's got to be the shadow we cast. And you can take a small person and cast a very big shadow if the light is right.
Correct.
Okay? And the light happened to be right on the Podesta emails. That's just the way it went out.
Yep.
But this is another one. Joshua 23:10, I'll just throw this one out here. One of you shall chase 1,000 men of the enemies, because the Lord your God himself will fight for you as he has promised. And I think we see that happening, especially with the reprieve that we got during the 4 years of Trump's White House presidency. It was really a reprieve that we dodged a bullet. We had 4 more years to kind of get our feet on the ground a little bit, get the religious freedom thing fleshed out, get a couple judges at the Supreme Court level and all this. There was a lot of judges that were placed in those 4 years.
Sure.
I don't know the number. I should have the number off the top of my head. I've written on that.
It was hundreds.
Hundreds. That was the thing that, who's the old battle axe? I can never remember her name. She died. The Supreme Court
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I can never remember poor Ruth's name. Sorry. But Bader Ginsburg, she was the one that was lamenting what would happen if Trump got in there.
Yeah.
She said for the country,
and she had to apologize for that. She said, I shouldn't be saying that out loud as a Supreme Court justice. Not that anybody didn't know it.
But what she did say was that it will be decades of problems at the judicial level. It'll be 4 years of Trump presidency. It will be 4 years of trouble for this country. But it'll be decades after that for the judicial. And that's the type of thing that we have to deal with and thank him for in being in there. That was part of this shadow that they're looking at us and saying, wow, you guys really had an effect there.
Yeah.
And it was just an effect. And it was a small group.
Just enough of it.
Just like in the Old Testament, you'd hear, Gideon or whatever, 300 overcoming 100,000 people. Well, that's the type of thing that happened right there. And it was really a moment you have to, thank God for that we had a bit of a reprieve.
Sure, and I think people need to understand, just so people are clear, we're not blowing our own horn on this. We're just saying this is, for some reason, all of a sudden, right in the heat of that campaign, the secular media's eye turned to us and started ripping and blasting and tearing away at us. And why was that? Because there were really no other Catholic outfits just sort of calling it like it is and saying, and we were speaking, encouraging Catholics, get out and vote, do the right thing here, understand, it's the Supreme Court justices, it's all of this. And, it's again, like we said in the earlier segment, this is giving us a breathing room. Again, the clarion call was that comment, and from what I understand, after having gone back and researched it some time ago, I don't remember the specifics of it now, so it was a few years back, but that line where Hillary said, religious values and teachings will have to change, that was actually a throwaway line. It wasn't in her script. So she just blurted that out. I mean, every now and then the mask comes down.
The mask comes down.
And you see everything for what it was. And I just happened to be watching that. I mean, I don't sit around and watch Hillary's speeches, as a favorite pastime. I just happened to be watching that, and I saw 1 minute of it, and it was in that 1 minute that she threw that throwaway line in there. And you remember, I came to everybody and said, "Hey guys, we need to consider this right now." And we all kind of said, "Yep, this would do you. Let's start thinking more about politics." Voris, you did politics like the back of your hand when you were in news. We need to do this sort of thing, and we did. And interestingly enough, while lots of Catholic apostolates, I suppose you would say, or just Catholic types who, many of whom weren't even on the internet back then, were saying, yeah, boy, this will be bad if Hillary wins and all that. We were formally, on stage saying, this cannot happen.
If that happens, it's going to be game over.
Yeah, I mean, think about right now, had Trump not won in 2016 and Hillary had, imagine where we'd be right now.
Going into the Biden administration with a year, or still being in the
right now, we'd be in Hillary 2.0.
Oh,
Hillary 2.0. It would. I mean, Trump upset the plans. That whole Trump personally, obviously, calling out and fake news and the swamp and all that stuff and everything. But the policies he got to put in place and the tax rollback and the economic improvement and all of that completely upset the stage for what was supposed to be a rather smooth transition to the Marxist complete takeover.
Yeah.
And, what did they spent 4 years of his presidency trying to undo all of that and call him into question and then impeach this and impeach that and this, that, and the other. And then 2020 happens and we'll just leave 2020 at 2020 and just say we're all pretty sure what happened in 2020.
Don't say anymore, we'll be banned from YouTube.
And then, so what happens after? What happens after that? Okay, so the first 2 years of Biden has really been undoing Trump. So whatever their schedule is they have in their mind, Nancy, John Kerry, Biden, Durbin, Leahy, all of them, everything they had in the works got delayed for 4 years and even a little bit more. There was enough in the 2022 midterms, enough to take back the House, barely, but nonetheless it did. Disappointing showing, but nonetheless it did. And that upsets the plans as well. We were supposed to be in Marxist nirvana right now, according to them. And we're not there. Yeah, and it was that little itty bitty marginal Catholic vote in those few little areas where it needed to happen that prevented this from happening.
Yeah, and we were the ones that helped get that Catholic vote out there, and they just cannot get over that, all the way up until recent times. And I'd like to also say the fact that there was one thing that Trump did during his presidency that we took exception to, and that was his pro-LGBT, along the lines of religious freedom, you might say.
Yeah.
And we're not really on board with that particular extension of his program.
Sure.
And that didn't stop us from saying, go vote for Trump.
Yeah.
So when the rest of the show, keep your filter on too, because we're going to see LGBT hate group. Okay, well, we still voted for a pro-LGBT president,
yeah,
right? With regard,
or at least I think in 2016 it'd be more fair to say he certainly appeared to be just LGBT indifferent.
Okay.
He didn't really. I mean, I don't remember anything from the campaign where he was out there, campaigning for it or anything like that. It was really just America first, and blah blah. Of course, America first from a Catholic point of view that needs some polishing.
Absolutely.
That needs some bringing up and fixing and adjusting. Lots of things in America, are not good and are not only, not Catholic, they're also anti-Catholic.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we're going to be taking care of all of that as we continue moving on with the life of the apostolate. So after all of the secular media, next, the left-wing Catholic media began weighing in. May 2017, the National Catholic Reporter, rightly dubbed the Distorter, fired off an article penned by dissident Michael Sean Winters, who wrote in that article, quote, "What you will not find at Church Militant is much in the way of learning. The church's intellectual tradition is one of its true glories. Voris makes lots of assertions, but he doesn't have two theological pennies to rub together to save his life. There is none of the subtlety that must attend all forms of human knowing, and still less any humility of the kind that is when appropriate when discussing the mysteries of God. Voris knows nothing about the history of the church, a history with much gray that doesn't fit well into the black or white vision Voris spews." The next mortar came from Rome. In July, Pope Francis's confidant, very close confidant, fellow Jesuit Father Antonio Spadaro, the editor-in-chief of the Jesuit journal La Civiltà Cattolica, took aim at Church Militant. Spadaro co-authored a piece slamming conservative Americans whose political proclivities, rooted in mutual moral concerns, maybe not so much theological, but certainly moral, he denigrated all of that cooperation as an ecumenism of hate. Titled Evangelical Fundamentalism and Catholic Integralism in the USA, it compared the country's authentic Christians to the terrorist group ISIS and took a direct swing at Church Militant. Quote, "There is a shocking rhetoric used, for example, by the writers of Church Militant, a successful U.S.-based digital platform that is openly in favor of a political ultra-conservatism and uses Christian symbols to impose itself. And to show its own preferences, it has created a close analogy between Donald Trump and Emperor Constantine, and between Hillary Clinton and Diocletian." Apologies to Diocletian. "The American elections in this perspective were seen as a spiritual war."
So he must have saw the vortex on the, he must have been tuned into that.
I think it's important to note that at that point, and still, James Martin was on that whole communications liaison world at the Vatican.
The stuff.
So I highly doubt that Father Antonio Spadaro is sitting there watching the vortex every day.
I was hoping
you should. Father, you should really. You'd learn a thing or two.
I did want to call out, there was a few lines in there. Spadaro's praise, his praise, successful U.S.-based digital platform. Fair enough. Openly in favor of political ultra-conservatism? Okay, check. Got AOC on the left. Of course you're going to be ultra-right there. The American elections were seen as a spiritual war. You bet. So the question to Spadaro, why can't conservatives from various denominations, rally around shared moral concerns?
Sure.
What's the problem?
I mean, interesting to note, coming from a priest, a Catholic priest, at least nominally so, Jesuit, who should be supporting Catholic teaching and tradition. The very fact that, what are these Protestants, who are, the conservative evangelicals and fundamentalists rallying, kind of the Jerry Falwell moral majority, next generation, they're rallying around what are essentially points of morality with Catholic teaching. Maybe not all of them. Certainly, we'd hope to expand that. They're not, that concerned really about divorce and remarriage and contraception. But abortion, family life, all these sorts of things. When Catholics can have shared values with other people in the political realm, who, by the way, Father, are cheering on Catholic teaching and taking it as their own, why wouldn't you be supporting of that? Why wouldn't we be supporting of that? And the fact that he just completely doesn't even touch it is like, I read that when I remember him, I was like, well, this is interesting. Why would he call this an ecumenism of hate? I really,
of all the articles from 2017, right after, the New York Times, all the way up until this recent FBI dossier, this article from Spadaro has disturbed me more than any of the others. The depth to which he will go there and twist things around and actually say that, you know, you guys shouldn't be, you know, ultra, or not the ultra, but the fundamentalist Protestants who care about morality and the Catholics who actually still care about morality get together and say we're going to vote for a candidate who cares about morality, religious freedom, 10 Commandments type of thing. That really, I mean, of all the articles, by far, hands down,
that was
that one
stuck
right
in our
there.
craw.
That really was disturbing that he would go there. That's at the top. He's an advisor, a confidant, I should say, to Pope Francis.
Well, and interesting, you know, I don't know, again, as I said earlier, I don't know if Father Spadaro sits there and watches Vortex every day, but we do have it on very, let's just say, good sources that somebody's in the Vatican Secretary of State office does. They watch Vortex every day. And as
find out who's the guy that needs to call back to the Vatican.
It's interesting, and you know that publication, La Civiltà Cattolica, that is personally reviewed. The entire publication is personally reviewed by the Vatican Secretary of State, every single issue.
And that makes it even all the more disturbing.
Yeah.
Dude, who's doing the theology on this?
Yeah, and more so, remember that I believe it was the next year, a number of months later, as we discussed in a Vortex earlier, Pope Francis was in Africa visiting with Jesuit seminarians, and I don't remember why it came up, but he directed them to go read that article. Wow. Specifically. That was from the mouth of Pope Francis.
Is that something?
So you're like, wow, you know, this is interesting. Why would the Vatican be targeting directly, indirectly, directly naming us, but then all the people who are putting their seal of approval on it, an article in which we essentially are the only named Catholic in the whole rest of that thing was about Protestants and evangelicals and fundamentalists and the political process, and Donald Trump shouldn't be viewed as like faithful to Catholic teaching and all that stuff. But you know, we're singled out, and all of a sudden the Pope is pointing to that article. Spadaro wrote it, who is a confidant of the Pope, very close confidant. The Vatican Secretary of State approves it.
Really strange stuff.
Yeah, it's very.
I know why he spoke to the Africans that way, though, because I think they, more than any other group of countries, if you will interiorize the Catholic faith in their laws.
Sure.
They have anti-homosexual, proactive, public life laws there, and anti-contraception and all these type of things. They actually put the morality into the laws.
Yeah, they do.
More than any other, you know, the whole continent. You can't speak for every country in the continent, but a good majority of those countries actually do interiorize at least the principles of the 10 Commandments and follow that through into their law. And that's where he's actually trying to say you don't. St. Thomas Aquinas had whole treatises on politics. So it goes back to Aristotle, back in the Greeks. I mean, you know, the common sense thinkers say politics is a way of which you allow a country's populace to have the opportunity to grow in virtue.
Absolutely.
If you're a good government, all you're going to accomplish is allow the people, as you said, the breathing room, the freedom, to grow in virtue and to nurture that with your laws, to give them that ability. And instead of legislating against that every single turn of the hat, especially with this transgender stuff, you know, a kid the age of 12 now can have his gender legally switched in Spain. They just passed a new law. Catholic Spain.
Yeah, Catholic small c.
Right. So it's amazing out there, that article, and that really disturbed me. I don't know how something like that can be defended from a Vatican position, or who, but you can shoot holes through it all day long with regard to the bad theology in there. So
yeah, there was also, remember, at the same time present there was who was the American, but in Canada all the time, priest who got busted on plagiarism.
Salt and Light.
Thomas Rosica. Thomas Rosica, who ran essentially Canada's version of EWTN, although nowhere near as orthodox in its presentations most of the time. He was there also. He was in the Vatican. I mixed it up with him in 2014 and 15 in person in the Vatican Press Hall. He did not like Church Militant at all. And held up essential heretics and priests and bishops who it turned out, were homosexual and got busted, he held these people up as heroes to him.
Also,
himself.
his theology, he told you his theology is his eschatology. You might say the church doesn't believe in mortal sin and people going to hell anymore. He said something about Michael.
Yeah,
the church
doesn't teach that anymore.
Right.
Father Rosica. Anyway, he went on to get busted for plagiarism, and now we haven't heard from him for a while. Yeah. But he did his damage. I'm convinced that he had a finger in that article.
The same month, another self-styled Catholic journal from Europe, Commonweal, fired off an article by Paul Moses with Church Militant in the crosshairs. The people at Church Militant consider themselves journalists bearing witness to the truth. Lonely gumshoes exposing corruption in the church. Oh, fair enough. But Church Militant dishonors the term investigative reporting with stories based on a propagandistic arrangement of facts and reliance on uncorroborated anonymous sources who are allowed to vent unchallenged even though they clearly have an axe to grind. He then adds, no one can really say who is a journalist except for him and who is not, but as someone who has spent a career writing and teaching journalism, I cringe at Church Militant's claim to be a journalistic outfit devoted to the truth.
We cringe at you, Paul.
Moses then includes a quote by Catholic League's Bill Donahue, calling Church Militant right-wing nuts. Now here's Donahue rant, okay, that Paul Moses thinks that he can just go ahead and drop in his news piece. The crazies on the Catholic right have set their sights on Cardinal Donald Wuerl, Archbishop of Washington. Why? Because he is close to Pope Francis and they hate the Pope. No, we don't. The attacks are coming from the Church Militant, a loose gang of angry right-wingers who specialize in character assassination, like this very quote here, and American Spectator hater George Neumeier, God rest his soul.
God rest his soul.
Well, okay, the best the Catholic established media can do is just go ahead and get some crazy crank on, like Catholic Donahue.
Mr. Investigative Journalist Paul Moses didn't happen to mention that Bill Donahue makes $1 million a year and gives himself raises.
Right, and he put about Cardinal Wuerl in there.
Were we right?
As if that doesn't shoot himself in the journalistic foot.
That didn't age well.
No, it didn't.
That quote didn't age well.
Lying, dishonored, who disgracefully said, I'm going to resign.
Decades and decades. Oh, this isn't true. This is decades and decades ago. Yeah, it turned out it was very, very correct.
Well, the hubris there in Paul Moses in going ahead and...
I've taught journalism forever. No, you've taught Paul Mosesism forever.
If he was such a journalist, why didn't he see all the problems with Wuerl prior to the very moment when Wuerl said, okay, I lied, I'm sorry, I'm getting out of here in disgrace, and crept off? They miss those stories all the way along there. So
it's interesting again that we're in the part of the show here we're talking about the response from the Catholic left, of which Moses is a member, and the only reason we say Catholic in front of it, we don't really believe they're Catholic in the sense of believing and embracing all the teachings and truths of the faith. We just say it to distinguish them from the secular left media. But as we look at all of this, you have to say that shows the link up between the secular left and that the Catholic left is really nothing more than the secular left with a big cross on the wall. I mean, that's really what it is. And what does that sort of Catholic leftist media do? Well, they'll go after the bishops a little bit when it comes to something, but because the bishops are always pushing the Democratic Party agenda of social justice, which, by the way, the term social justice is not a Catholic word, it's social teaching. Social justice is a co-opting of Catholic social teaching to turn it into, just a matter of justice. Truth is the most important thing. Truth is directly linked to charity. Justice comes along. Truth is Jesus Christ. Charity is a supernatural virtue. Justice is sort of down the list of virtues to be a cardinal virtue. But it's at the service of truth and charity. And these guys never seem, it's like the only thing that matters is we're just going to make sure everybody's, fix climate change and make sure everybody pays taxes. And they're using the Catholic teaching to create and foster a political agenda which is really funny when you think about that's what we were accused of doing, and by Spadaro and other Catholic leftist journalists. But guys, we're honest about it. That is exactly what we are doing. We're saying Catholic truth should dominate a culture. Period. It doesn't mean you should be executed if you're not a Catholic, or held at the sword and forced to convert. That's not what we're saying. But the Catholic teaching is based on natural law truths. Well, most of it. Some of it's obviously divine revelation, but these natural laws, like is what Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas talks about. We need to order a society around the truths of natural law. That's a Catholic position. So yeah, we don't hide from that at all. We don't shrink from it. We say it constantly. Here we are saying it again. But these guys won't say that about themselves. They'll promote the causes. They'll talk about them as though they're good, but they won't step out of their story, whatever their story is, and admit, we think this is the way to lead the world and we want to push this agenda. We do that. They won't.
The agenda that they're pushing are all political questions. They're really in lockstep with the left with regard to immigration, climate change, and these. We actually say it was good that Trump got in there so he could get good Supreme Court justice in there, so you can actually have a pro-life reading. Not that they would say, well, I'm pro-life and I read it this way, but an actual honest, fundamental approach to the reading of the Constitution that would render an outcome that would be pleasing to the pro-life movement. That's pro-life is a matter of Fifth Commandment, thou shalt not kill.
Sure.
That's not just an agenda to say, well, I would like to get my guy in there so he'll open the borders up.
Right.
I would like my guy in there so he'll pass climate change or send all the jobs to China, Beijing, Biden.
Or use Catholic Charities to be a travel service and collect hundreds of millions of dollars every year from taxpayer services, shipping illegal immigrants all over the country.
To me, that's a political agenda.
That's a political agenda.
We're talking a ever-present, ever-new set of 10 commandments that are at play no matter what country.
And what's exposed by that is when you have shifted your arena to simply politics and you have aligned yourself politically with people who are opposed to natural law truths, you are now creating a political cover for sin to step forward and take the lead in the culture. And that's what we've seen.
And that's where you have at the top up there, when you get Spadaro writing and then the Secretary of State actually approving it and the Pope actually promoting it. That type of theology is kind of is out there. It's naked as far as a political agenda goes, and it's kind of scary.
And still in 2017, secular leftists dropped the term right-wing and picked up alt-right as the label of choice when attacking Church Militant. Vice News. Here is the first of 2 attempts by Vice News to shame Church Militant into silence. And the battles continued into 2018. Look at ultra-Orthodox Catholic propaganda pushes anti-LGBT agenda. Well, you guys pushed the agenda, so okay. Anyway, but Church Militant then got designated as espousing a hatred for so-called anti-LGBT agenda by the widely discredited Southern Poverty Law Center, which listed CM as a hate group. That is, again, what are we talking about? We're talking about a moral choice. This is not a question of politics. Ultimately, it's a question of, there's their map right there. That's the Southern Poverty Law Center. Important to note that all of this, publicity, if you want to call it that, spilled over into the political realm. The Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, actually, based on that Southern Poverty Law Center list, there were 7 groups, including us, named by SPLC in Michigan. One of the very first things she did when she came to office was set up like a little adjunct, wing or unit to investigate the hate groups in Michigan, and they opened up an investigation on us. We went straight to our good friends at Thomas More Law Center, and
Dana Nessel happens to be in a same-sex relationship.
Yes, of course. Okay. So, we're a hate group, and this designation of hate. Remember, this all started back in Obama. You're a racist if you're like, well, I don't like his tax policy because you're a racist. No, I don't like his tax policy. I don't care if he's black, purple, green, or whatever. It's a stupid tax policy.
Right.
Or the climate change thing is ridiculous. Racist. Well, this is the thing too. If they are very good at, and they're very good at it because the right lets them get away with it. You know, they immediately go on the defensive. How many talk shows have we seen and all these various news things where it goes, you know, you're a racist. I'm not a racist. And the whole discussion becomes about racism. Tell them to shut up. I'm not a racist. I think your plan is stupid. That's it. If somebody who is not a white Christian male cuts me off in traffic and I like blow the horn at them, I'm not blowing the horn at them because they're Hispanic. I'm blowing the horn at them because they drive stupid.
Right.
And that's the point here. So this whole hate group thing is a way to completely turn off discussion about the topic at hand, immediately label you, and create another issue which doesn't really exist. We don't hate people we don't hate anybody, but in this particular world here, it was about LGBT. We don't hate people who have same-sex attraction.
So
It's
if we write an
ridiculous.
article against contraception and say Catholic couples who are contracepting, does that mean we hate Catholic couples? If we write,
By the way, we write those articles.
we do. If we write an article about how divorced and remarried shouldn't receive Holy Communion, does that mean we hate all the divorced and remarried people out there?
Yeah,
Well,
if we write an article and we say, you know, if you're not Catholic, you know, you should convert. Does that mean we hate you because
Every
you're
single
not
person
Catholic?
who's not Catholic, of course not.
Crazy.
The idea that LGBT happens to be a specific thing is more emphasized by that side of the group. And even in that side of the church, I really cringed at 2014 with the relatio, midterm relatio, and it said homosexuals have gifts and qualities. My goodness, you're gonna take that whole person there with every gift and quality they have, and you're gonna label him as the totality of that as a homosexual. Period. Right. That's his moniker. That's it.
That's it. That's all he is or she is.
Really?
Yeah.
So to me, that really is you know, a low bar you're setting for that particular an identity there. You just strip everything from that person,
right,
and all they have is some same-sex attraction going on.
Yeah, it's a very disturbing way for you know, for the culture to view people. Again, you can sort of understand it coming from the culture. You got to fight it. I mean, it's not right, but at least you go, okay, well, they don't know Catholicism. But when it's coming from people who are baptized Catholics and obviously badly formed, including clergy, that is a very serious problem.
Yeah, and just for the record, we do want LGBT people to convert, just like everybody to convert to a good 10 Commandment moral way of life, so they can be with us forever in eternity if we ever make it to heaven ourselves.
That's it.
In 2019, Michigan's lesbian activist, leftist attorney General Dana Nessel, who we were mentioning here, announced the formation of a hate crime unit.
That's the one
This
we're
is
just
what
talking about. Yep.
And a database to track incidences of so-called bias or hate. Nessel's office confirmed it was using the SPLC's designation of Church Militant as a hate group. Thank you very much. For the basis of some kind of investigation. Richard Thompson from the Ann Arbor-based Thomas More Law Center, great group, said that this hate crime unit had no policies in place to safeguard the constitutional rights of individuals who committed no crime but are being investigated for espousing traditional marriage, has no clear definitions of bias incidences or hate crimes against LGBT persons that are backed up by Michigan statutes or court decisions, has failed to provide any clear policies or parameters governing the prosecution of hate crimes, nor does it have a clear definition of what constitutes a hate group. So, you know, we're going to have this you know,
I mean, yeah, we just talked about that. This, you know, you all of the publicity turns into something actionable by the government. And that's the point. That's why people are scared about that FBI dossier, and rightly so.
And we have to say the SPLC, which is the same group that's being, we're going to find out later on in this broadcast, is the same group that the FBI dossier is based on. Yeah. For all the radical traditionalist groups out there. I can't believe how this group, SPLC, which has been so discredited.
And discredited. Their original owners got busted for, you know, ripping off hundreds of thousands of dollars, and because they serve the media narrative. I mean, that's essentially it. You know, then of course there was the concerted effort in 2021 by leftists at the city of Baltimore, in Maryland, of course. And what did they do? Well, we were putting on the rally, Bishops is Enough, the Bishops Enough is Enough rally, and what did they wind up doing? Well, they tried to block the rally, and they did more than try to block it. They almost did block the rally. We had to go to court, spend close to, in total revenue lost as well as legal bills, close to $400,000. And the media, of course, got in. And I do have to say that for the most part, the media was somewhat fair in this, certainly more fair than any of the other coverage we've received.
Well, we were such the underdog in the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, you see this here, that Baltimore City sued after blocking conservative Catholic group's location for rally featuring Steve Bannon. Milo out of concerns over violence. Of the judge, 72-year-old woman from Brooklyn, tore them apart for this. But again, not before we had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to exercise our constitutional rights. Here's another one. Judge orders Baltimore to allow protest by Church Militant at Bishop's meeting. They originally interfered with this back in August. We didn't get that ruling, that one right there that you just saw, until about a week before. I think it was 5 days before or 6 days before. I might be off a little bit of my timeline, but there was hardly any time to recover from it. We had, when they interfered with our contract with that the pavilion where we were having it, we had 2,200 attendees. The whole place only held 3,000. We had 2,200 attendees already signed up. That's it right there, that little place. That was Michelle Malcolm was there. It was great. We only had about half the turnout because this went on for months, and people were saying, should I go? Should I not? Should I book a plane? Should I not? Should I get a hotel? Should I not? And it largely accomplished what the city, and I'm pretty sure the USCC bishops had done behind the scenes as well. While they couldn't prevent it, thanks to the court ruling, they watered it down sufficiently so about only half the crowd, maybe a little less than half the crowd, was actually there. Also, the city, and this is the danger when you start talking about going after City Hall, and I think a lot of people don't quite understand this. City Hall, unless you're Elon Musk, City Hall has more money than you.
And it's not their money.
And it's not their money.
They don't mind spending it.
They keep spending it. They got destroyed in that ruling by the judge. 87 pages, tearing them from limb to limb. At that point, our bill wasn't, it was high. It was $230,000, $40,000, I think, at that point. They appealed it to the U.S. Fourth Circuit, which means we had to go to court. And when you go to an appellate court because of the expertise you need to have, that costs us like another $140,000 for them to shut down the city with one sentence.
Yeah.
So this is how they play.
It's not their money. They don't care. We keep it moving. And all they're trying to do is buy time.
That's it.
Get you up to your event, and then you're over with.
Yeah, and you're done. Now, even the FBI, as we all know, is targeting Church Militant. On page 4 of a now retracted report, thanks guys, the FBI calls out Church Militant as a far-right Catholic media outlet that supposedly is part of a white nationalist movement. This all came out, of course, right here in this uncovered D.C. report by Kyle Seraphin, who is a good Catholic, who got this from a leak in the Virginia field office, Richmond, Virginia field office. And, it's important here that, we understand what's going on. He released the report, and there we were being discussed on page 4 of that. I don't really care that the FBI backtracked on it. The FBI backtracked on it because it got leaked.
Right.
And then they just got swamped. Do we really think? I mean, there's an investigation. They said, we're doing an investigation. Are you telling me it's been 2 weeks now since that came out? It takes you 2 weeks to figure out who wrote the report? Don't you just go to the guy and say, hey, who put this in? Can't you? Hey, guys, let's get the Richmond field office together. It's not like you have 7,000 people working in the Richmond field office.
Right.
Who wrote the report,
Probably
guys?
wasn't the cleaning lady over there.
Yeah, who is it? Who wrote the report? Where'd you get the information from? They came out and said, oh, we don't use the SPLC. It's not a valid source. I mean, on and on and on. Hey, are you going to fire somebody? You're going to name who did it? Who else was with him? That guy has a boss who said, okay, this is fine. Who assigned it to him? Start trickling the information out. We're going to find out all of this the same way we're going to find out who leaked the Dobbs decision draft.
You mean never?
Which means, the 12th of never is when we'll find this out.
Right. And as far as alt-right white nationalists, okay, I'm white, I can't help that. Nationalist, do you mean that I love my fatherland? Am I patriotic? The Catholic Church calls that a virtue.
Yeah, it is. Patriotism is a virtue.
Okay, to have your love of your fatherland. So what is the problem with that, unless you're trying to say somehow we're racist or we hate everybody else in the world? And where's your basis for that?
Yeah, it's, are we Christian? Sure, we're Catholic, as a matter of fact, the original Christians. And white, yeah, but I mean, the implication is that you don't love, care, have any compassion for somebody who isn't white. That's ridiculous. Most of the Catholic Church today in the world, the 1.2 billion, are not white. It's largely confined, for the most part, if you throw in Australia, it's largely confined to North America, and that means from the Rio Grande up, not Mexico and some of Central America, and Europe. That whole thing doesn't comprise 40% of the entire world population of Catholics. Most of the Catholic Church is not white. So the idea that somehow we're Catholic and hate people who aren't white, well, first of all, we'd have to start off hating 60% of Catholics before we even moved on to any other race. It's pathetic. But we wanted to put this show together, folks, to let you sort of see where things are, how they evolved. We've been in this fight now going on 7 years. Thank you, New York Times, for your goofy article that really sort of got the ball rolling on this. That proves once again that God can write straight with crooked lines. So as we wrap up here, we'd invite all of you to please join us in our closing prayer that we use just about the end of every production, the Salve Regina. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus exules filiae Eve. Ad te suspiramus gementes et flentes in hac lacrimarum vale. Ei ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much for joining us. Please tell your friends about this program and sort of let them see how things develop. We're very big on history here. And just before we leave, we want to give a shout out to our marketing guys to say, this graphic on our back wall, take a wide shot if you can, guys. This thing rocks. Great job, guys. That's it for us here right now. All of us keep Church Militant and all of our work in your prayers. We will see you soon. God love you.